All right, folks. So this week I have decided that I will not make a golf video this week because this week I think it's time for a good video on politics, social politics, social events this week, because I think there are a few things that happened this weekend that really kind of, let's just say, really kind of got me upset, and I wanted to talk about it. And I was like, well, should I make a video about this? I don't know if I really want to make a video about politics. So I went and played golf on Sunday, and Sunday here was really nice. Weather was beautiful, and I was going to go to the range. I was going to try not to spend money or blow my routine to actually play where I went to the range. They have a nice range there. But I ended up playing a full round anyway because the weather was so nice, and I got a twilight ticket for $40, and they let me play until it was dark, which was a problem. A lot of courses I've played lately, they want you off the course at like 4 or 5 or some ridiculous number. Especially in Virginia, it's a real problem. You get away from DC, and a lot of courses will want you to get back in well before dark so they can close up everything and close the clubhouse and everything, get the carts all washed up, everything nice, and go home early. But it means that you can't play until dark. I'm used to playing until dark. One of the good things about learning to play and playing a lot in Maryland is almost every course you play in Maryland will let you play until dark. And it's rare that that's the case in Virginia if you get farther away from the city. So I played this course, which was fairly close to downtown, and they just, everything came together. But what it meant was I ended up playing a course that I played before, and therefore I didn't want to shoot a video of it because I've already played there and already shot a video of it. So in any case, I figured that this week I'd make a video about an issue that has come to the fore in torrential force over the year, and along with the nonsense that's going on with Trump and the surreal nature of the Trump presidency, how people tend to want to pick apart the issues and support Trump on minute details of the issues instead of looking at the overall picture, the big picture, the basic insanity of the man and his supporters and his political policies, economic policies even. They only want to look at the small details and say, well, technically, we need secure borders, and it's illegal for people to come over the border without going through a port of call, and we can't have these mass migrations over the border because they'll swamp our asylum system, and then we can't handle all the people. And yes, technically all that stuff is right, but the answer is not to build a wall. And there's no way around this. The whole idea of a border wall across 2,500 miles of the southern border, plus the Canadian border is another 2,500, 3,000 miles, plus the Atlantic coast, and plus the Pacific coast. How are we going to build an effective wall around all these perimeters? It's just nonsense. You can't do that. It just doesn't make sense unless you're going to invest like tens of trillions of dollars to do it. And even then, who in their right mind is going to pay $10 to $20 trillion to put an effective border wall around the entire United States? It just doesn't make sense. And one of the reasons, it's not just financially. One of the big reasons is that most of the problems we're seeing now are happening at the legal ports of call. People are not necessarily coming across the desert in Arizona so much as they are going through the ports of call in Texas and Florida and and all the other ports of call in California, along the East Coast, so forth. They're going through the ports of call and either carrying contraband, or they're going through the ports of call and declaring asylum, which is exactly how it's supposed to happen. So the problem then is that we have a process, But that process is not good enough for the people who are saying, oh, the process is being overwhelmed. Look, we have a process. We have a process, and instead of putting money into the process, he's trying to put money out into the weeds, okay? It does nothing to solve the problem with the process. All it does is say, well, we'll just stop, the 500 people who try to cross the desert in Arizona in the summer, by stopping them, or hopefully stopping them at the border wall, which is yet to be proven effective at all in this regard, okay? While ignoring the 20,000 people who will just walk up to, the port of call in El Paso or Brownsville or whatever, and declare for asylum there, right? Where there's already facilities where they can already be dealt with by the Border Patrol, and they can already be processed. They don't have to worry about trudging through the desert and getting bitten by scorpions and snakes and stuff and dying of dehydration out in the middle of nowhere. They can just go to a existing port of call. So again, putting money into the border wall takes away money from the established resources that we have to deal with the asylum problem. Also, it takes away money that we could spend to deal with the contraband problem, which is a huge problem, okay? And is the source of revenue for all of these drug gangs operating in Mexico, not to mention the guns that are being shipped back to Mexico that they're buying with the money they're getting selling drugs, okay? There's nothing that building a border wall is going to do about that problem. Nothing, okay? That's why the whole idea was to have Mexico pay for the border wall, which was ridiculous also. And this is the whole problem I have with the Trump presidency, is he's just constantly talking all this nonsense and then looking for one or two kernels of truth to rationalize it. Only a crazy person does that kind of stuff. Okay? It's crazy. So the problem is that it's not just Trump doing this. And this is where I think that the people who are aware of what Trump is and aware of the problem with GOP politics, basically the talking of shit and the doing of shit at the same time. Like this thing in North Carolina where they went around and collected absentee ballots from people, and then they were just lost. Who knows what happened to them. The problem is that the Me Too movement and the sexual harassment movement have come to the fore in force over the last year, but they're not really solving the problem, okay? The real problem is when we have people like Madonna that say they were raped, and Pamela Anderson that says she was raped, and the senator who says that she was raped by a commander, and she implied, when I heard it on the television, it implied it was the perpetrators. It was more than one person that was involved in her rape. Not just not punishing those who were raped, who raped her, but also actually raped her. It was sounded like there was more than one person. And now this Top Chef person, Pacmani Laknimi, or whatever her name is, she comes up and says that she was raped. All these people who are saying that they were raped, and they're missing one key element to this whole revelation on their part. They don't say who raped them. Okay, which in my opinion is 75% of the issue. Okay, you were raped 25, 30 years ago, and we're sorry that happened, but ultimately the real problem is if you don't say who raped you, you really aren't saying much. You're just wrapping yourself like Trump wraps his arm around the United States flag. You're wrapping yourself in the victimhood of being raped, and you're showing solidarity for these women who were raped, but you're not dealing with the actual problem of someone raping you and you not reporting it to the police, you not saying who this person is, and the person getting away with it, scot-free, free to go off and rape somebody else, or free to at least blend back into the background and act like he's not a rapist, or act like he's not someone who has committed sexual assault against somebody. Half of the problem, at least half the problem, is we need women who say that they were raped. If you're going to make that claim in public, say who raped you. Yeah, I understand that much like what Stormy Daniels went through over Donald Trump, okay, which was all kinds of wrong because apparently she tried to get the story out, and it came out in a way that looked like it was more like she was trying to sell the story and couldn't get any buyers. And then she tried to publicize the story and then couldn't get anyone to take her seriously afterwards because she had signed this non-disclosure agreement. And then it turned out that the non-disclosure agreement was not actually signed by the president himself. So she's all worried about this non-disclosure agreement, and people are worried about the fact that there's no non-disclosure agreement because it wasn't signed. Okay, so her whole story got muddled. It really did get muddled. And frankly, it's something that she should have come out with. She should have just come out with, in the press before the election, like Karen McDougal should have come out with before the election and talked about the fact that they had an affair with Donald Trump before the election. But instead, for their confused reasons, they decided they weren't going to talk about it, okay, until now. I don't understand why. I mean, I do understand why, but I think it's undermining the entire argument when you have been in an affair with somebody, or you've been in a relationship, an illicit relationship, where they tried to keep you from publicizing it or something, and everybody should know. I mean, the guy's a public figure, or he's in a professional position of responsibility, something somewhere where people should know what happened, and then you come out with all this nonsense about why you can't say who it was, or you can't say it when it's important to say it, but you're going to come out and say it years later, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later. Okay. Yes, I completely understand that it's a difficult thing to do. We all understand the issues. Okay. But how does it help for you to half reveal the truth? You're still covering for that person. Okay. That is the problem. It's no different than anyone who knows that somebody murdered somebody or somebody robbed from somebody or something like that. The big problem with testifying in the public eye about an event is that people tend to only want to say half the truth. Okay? And this is exactly where I think the whole Trump mentality has come from. It's so important to talk about the specific issue, but we can't talk about the details or the rationale or the logic or the entire issue. We've only got to talk about these little parts and pieces and stuff instead of getting the whole story out there. And it undermines the credibility of the person who's doing the talking, and it undermines the severity of the issue. You want the issue to be taken seriously. You want women to be taken seriously when these things happen to them, when they testify, but you yourself won't testify about what happened to yourself. I think that completely undermines the whole, and a lot of people I've heard say that. Yeah, all these women are talking about how this happened and that happened so bad and all this, but they won't discuss their own case. Okay, I've seen statistics that say in this country that 2/3 of the women in this country will experience some sort of sexual harassment or assault during their lifetime. Now, there's a couple issues with that. The first is that the definition of sexual harassment is so broad as to encase a whole range of behavior, okay, that some people would consider sexual harassment, some people would not. It's that simple. Just like any kind of harassment, some people would consider harassment, some people would not consider harassment. It's one of the reasons why it happens. Okay. The second thing is that if you're going to claim that you're a victim of a crime, don't walk away from it just saying that you're a victim without identifying the person who victimized you. Even if you can't prove it, you can still have your statement that, in your opinion, that's what happened. Okay, it's perfectly valid. And if you're worried about slander or libel laws, look, it's up to them to prove that they didn't do it. It's that simple. They might sue you, and that's a different problem. And if you got to worry about your legal costs and all this kind of stuff, or the effect on your lifestyle, look, so does everybody else. Everybody else, people. That's why command rape is such an issue in this country, is because the people who get raped are afraid of what the person who raped them would do to them if they didn't agree to it. That's half the problem right there. Okay, so we don't really change the system if we're afraid of the consequences, which are going to be negative to a large degree, okay, all we do is reinforce the concept that possible negative consequences are enough to lead people to submit to sexual torture. That's what it does. That's what it says. And I think the most important thing here to realize is that we can't walk around afraid to talk about what might happen if something happens. We need to deal with what might happen, just like we need to deal with the realities of rape and mugging and robbery and murder. We need to deal with these things. And I think that the problem in this case here, when we're talking about Trump and this border wall, is that Trump is talking about the security of what happens if we don't have a border wall, but he's ignoring the reality of what happens where we do have a border wall. We have these far bigger problems where we do have a border wall than we have where we don't. And that's the problem that we're not dealing with right now. That's why it was so important for him to talk about having Mexico pay for the border wall. And that's why it's so important for him to talk about changing the asylum laws and changing the immigration laws and changing the broken system and all this kind of stuff. He's avoiding all that crap, all that stuff, by trying to get people to focus on just getting funding for a wall that runs 1,000 miles away from the real problem. And women are doing the same thing by talking about how they were assaulted, but not naming the person who assaulted them. They're running away from the real problem.